Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, welcome to another tutoring tips episode of the Prepped and Polished podcast. My name is Aaron Cotton from Prepped and Polished. I'm the Director of Tutoring and Senior Tutor at Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website, www.preppedandpolished.com, for tutoring in person or online. Call us at 781-753-9951, or feel free to chat with us instantly on our website to answer any questions or thoughts you have or interest that you have in tutoring. You can also join our Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. If you have any questions after the show, please feel free to ask us a question on our chat feature on our website, or you can answer your questions or any inquiries that you have. We love hearing from you. Let's get right into episode 221, Time Management on the ACT and SAT, Knowing Your Pace. Now, in terms of understanding your pace on either the SAT or ACT, there are a couple of basics of the test that you want to know. Specifically, how much time you have in each section, how many questions there are, and or how many passages there are. It's important for you to understand this foundational element of each section of the test in order for you to be aware of what you have to do in order to manage your time. Now, if you're looking at any section of the test, and you see I'm in the reading section of, let's say, the ACT, there are 4 passages, and you have 35 minutes standard time to do it, and that comes out to be about 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage, which is not the easiest of things to manage upon first glance. That's why you want to be prepared before going into the test, knowing this information so you can plan accordingly. If you're in the reading section of the SAT, for example, 5 passages, 65 minutes standard time, comes out to be 13 minutes per passage. Now, once you know the time frame that you have to work with, it's also good to know what kind of questions you can expect, both types of questions, but also types of passages. Again, the more you know about the test, the easier it will be to tackle it. And once you know the questions, the amount of questions, the timing that you have to do, the next step that you have to do is practice, but without time, or not timing yourself in the traditional sense. What do I mean by this? Talking about time management, I'm saying to not time yourself. But here's a catch. I want you to track your time. If, let's say, you have to get down to 13 minutes a passage, that is challenging for any one person. So what I recommend, time yourself reading a passage, answering the questions, to see how much time it normally takes without any kind of pressure. Once you figure out that time, then comes the next step, is how to compare it to what you're supposed to be at. If you take 15 minutes for a passage, okay, now we know. But if you want to get to 13 minutes a passage, we're going to have to work on slimming down the time that it takes for each passage. And the only way you can do that is through practice. Now, once you know how much time you're taking, as I said, it's kind of like weight training. You don't want to start with the heaviest weight. You don't want to try and lift the heaviest that you can lift upon getting in. Instead, start with a lighter weight and then slowly build yourself up in terms of weight. Except this way, we're taking the time you're taking and slimming it down. Once you get that and you shorten your time, then you're ready for the next step. And that's going to be putting it all together. But before we even get into that, you have to think of the following. When you're taking the test, you have to be aware of a few things. One, where's the clock in the room? The clock is going to be your best friend, even though if you don't like reading clocks, it's okay. But if you know where the clock is, go ahead and do a few things. One, you want to know how to read the clock. Now, I'm not saying you don't know how to read the clock, but I want you to work on how to quickly read the clock, knowing where you are on the clock. If it's digital or if it's analog, that's going to be a difference. But then once you know where you are on the clock, doing quick math. All right, so I have 13 minutes per passage. It's 10 o'clock, so I need to finish this passage by 10:13. Or, it's 10:08 to 13 minutes. Doing the math in your head so that you can figure out when you should be finishing up that passage before moving on into the next one. Now, sometimes what I recommend to students is bring a watch. It doesn't have to be super stylish, but it's something that you can utilize at any given point. If I have a watch on my wrist, or if I take it off and I set it up right on the test, it's easier for me to just look quickly at the clock and be aware of my timing while I'm taking the test. Sometimes I'll even write down when I should be finishing up a passage or when I should be finishing up a set of questions before moving on into the next one. I want to make note of that because I need to be aware of it throughout the entirety of the test. Now, this is the next part that I was telling you about before. Entirety of the test. If you work on time management with a per passage or per question set amount, you're going to then have to work on the next big step, which is putting it all together. Not having one passage, but several. So if you're used to 13 minutes a passage and you're working on building up your endurance, the next step is then to say, okay, well, what about 2 passages in a row? If we're still going into that 13-minute time frame, it's going to be timing yourself for 36 minutes. 3 passages, 39 minutes. By slowly building up your endurance, you're avoiding something that's called test fatigue. And test fatigue is a big thing. It happens on both the ACT and the SAT. You can get tired out by the end of the test. And if you're not used to timing yourself with multiple passages, it's going to happen even more quickly than you would like. So be aware of that. And once you get through the point of going through and understanding the timing per passage for one section of the test, rinse, dry, and repeat for another section. Obviously, when we're looking at reading and writing language or the English section versus the math section, there's going to be a little bit of difference there. So we want to make sure that you feel comfortable on both sides of the test in terms of how you manage your time, because there's going to be different ways to manage it. Now, if you're going through it and you find yourself running out of time in a passage, it's okay. Just know in the next passage, you might have to take a little less time per passage. Or the opposite, you're going through it really quickly. That allows you then to spend more time on the next passage. That's what managing your time really means, is being constantly aware of where you're at within any section of the test. Now, the most important thing, of course, beyond this is practice. So I would recommend all of you to practice one passage, see how it is. Slowly understand, how can I manage it? How can I adjust? Should I be taking more time? Should I be taking less time? And then put it all together. This wraps up our show, episode 221, Time Management on the ACT and SAT, Knowing Your Pace. Be on the lookout for our next podcast, episode 222. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now get out there and take control of your education. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.